All right, we are live. So my name is Charles Elwood. My company is Solismatica LLC, and I do business intelligence in Power BI for the marketing world. I've found a love for marketing and doing these types of videos. So I like telling stories, and I like telling other people's stories too. So that's why I invited two of my friends, Greg Kramer and Frank Van Delden. Greg is in Wisconsin. Frank's in the Netherlands. So maybe we start with Greg, maybe a quick introduction, Greg, and talk about your company and your niche, and then we'll jump to Frank.
Oh, by all means. Charles, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I always love hearing what's on your mind and talking with you. I am an accountant, the CPA and financial analyst, and somewhere along the line, I got bit hard, and I guess probably coming on over a decade now, bit hard by the data bug. And really, that's everything I do has been in the financial world, and then like this kind of juggernaut, which is data and analytics. So that's kind of what I'm about. And as Charles said, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. So Frank, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Yes, I'm Frank from the Netherlands. I work as a head of financial department in a hospital. I am also a CPA, also an auditor. I audit in the healthcare, so I see a lot of hospitals and other non-public, other public companies. I went, I think, 10 years ago, I went from auditing to the other side of the table, and I was head of youth health of our state, and for a few years. And after reorganization, I went to the hospital, and I did some different functions, and already got some data feeling with the youth company, and that was in Excel. It was with SQL, MSS SQL. It was making data for the managers. It was all in one hand. And I did a lot more in the hospital as a BI consultant. And the last year, I launched Power BI within our hospital. And we are now live with 200 users with Power BI in our hospital instead of Cognos. It was not planned like this. It was a quick tool last year for some specific goals, but we ended up with rolling it out on the whole company.
Wow, fascinating. So just to real quick then, so it was on Cognos before, which is an IBM product, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and then you were in charge of and help with the deployment of Power BI, and you've got 200 users, you said?
Yes.
Wow,
yes,
fascinating.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, recap that for our audience in case anybody has questions, that have used Cognos before or are looking at a deployment with 200 plus people, because that's quite a number of people, in terms of setting up. So, and then you have some slides potentially, and you can kind of explain to us some of the challenges with such a large deployment. So fascinating stuff, Frank. So what I'm going to do now is, because some of the glitches with kind of how this works is, I'm going to have to jump off and I'm going to have to send this link out over some of my social media platforms. So I'm going to tee a question up for Greg and Frank. One of which is, our audience today is interested in healthcare, and I've been seeing an uptick in healthcare types of businesses that are looking for help with data, right? Business intelligence. But one question, Power BI is still kind of new to people, and Greg and I had this discussion prior. It's actually been around for many, many years, maybe 10 to 15, inside of Excel, actually, kind of hidden. But we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But Power BI, business intelligence, data analytics, for just the average person or for businesses, is not something that's new. So we'll talk to that a little bit. But my question to Greg and Frank is, if you were a let's say a CEO, CMO, CIO at a large healthcare firm, how would you know what to search for? What would you look for to find somebody like us? and what types of data potentially in those businesses potentially might you want analyzed in something like Power BI, right? So this is coming from maybe some of our audience members. If they were leadership positions, what data and how would you find somebody, and what tools would you use? Like, why Power BI, right? So Greg, maybe we'll tee it off with you, and I'm going to jump off and come back in a second. So go ahead.
Okay, that's a good question, Charles. I would say primarily it's going to be folks that are more in the trenches versus like really high level leaders. I think that there is a data tsunami. I think everyone understands that. I guess in terms of search criteria, I wouldn't consider myself any sort of expert in that, particularly when it comes to healthcare. But I think being more savvy with data, being more savvy with Power BI is probably the rule there. Frank, what are your thoughts? Mine are terribly helpful in that question.
Yeah, well, I also started my own company at Control of Reports, so don't search any further. No, that's just a statement. No, I think it's important that you have the access to the data. So people like a financial controller or business controller or on the business analyst that have the data and have the opportunity to explore and do something with Power BI, because in a lot of companies, the end users don't have a lot to say. So if there's a new trend, you have to have some pioneer in your company. And in my company, I was that person, so it was easier to discuss it with the CFO because that was my boss. But in other places, I think you have to search for the business analyst and ask them, okay, what are the new trends? And you have to challenge yourself if Power BI is the right tool for you, because it's not the answer for everything. And it's not good to say, because I also like Power BI, but it's also depending on what kind of company you are and what kind of solution you want. Flexible, do you want to have quick data? Do you want dense Power BI? Very good.
Oh, good points, Frank and Greg. So I'm going to summarize a little bit. I was writing down some notes. So it's really a tool for the people in the trenches, the people that actually have access to the data. And I've heard that over and over again. It's the tool for, you were behind the scenes doing all this analysis, reporting it up, using Excel or some other tool. But now you have Power BI and I've heard that a lot, where it's a groundswell, it's a bottom-up approach where people with the data are using this tool, finding insights are easier to run. Whereas before they were spending 10 hours, 5 hours generating these reports per week, now it's a button press, or they set up auto refresh and it's already done, and then they become heroes because their analysis is available in seconds, right? So any comments on that before we move on?
Yeah, so I wanted to say, Charles, and I remember James Phillips, who was the head of, I think he's the head of like Power Platform now. Back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, he was overseeing Power BI. I remember putting that exact question, to him, saying, "Hey, James, how do you see this Power BI phenomena unfolding? Do you see it as a top down or a bottom up?" And I still remember clearly this day, his response was, "At Microsoft, we have the luxury of doing both." Yeah. So, I've presented here in Madison with this enterprise, white paper. So, if you do get some, big level boss that's excited about doing an enterprise-wide transformation, and, it kind of comes down from on high. We did a presentation with this is 4 or 5 years ago, installing dashboards at Microsoft. So they basically just kind of said, "Hey, look, here we're at Microsoft. This is how we do dashboards." I remember Will Thompson just kind of spent an evening talking about how they do it at Microsoft. How much more open could you be?
Yeah.
My experience as an analyst was always someone that was, kind of had a lot of data chopping. And so things could, and then you get in your boss's ear and there's a sort of, kind of trickle up. So
Yeah.
Microsoft has the luxury of kind of coming at things both ways.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's true. You can come at it for both ways, but the real secret, the real power I've seen is that, there is the bottoms up approach. You are having heroes at the bottom who are able to use it and then push it up to their leadership. And I think that's an interesting strategy, but it seems to be working. It gives the power. I think Satya and the new Microsoft philosophy is enabling, all people that have access to the data to gain the insights, and it's empowering people. It's giving that power to that analyst, right? So, no, interesting insights. So this back,
also,
yep,
also most healthcare companies don't have a large of innovation group, so there must be an external reason to search for new tools and search for tools that in the current situation aren't sufficient to deliver. So and then Power BI that comes in play.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yep. So if you don't have the resources to search for a new tool, and then Power BI is so easy for somebody to research and start using, you've kind of fill that gap for people. Oh, great point, Frank. So Frank and Greg, I want to jump to my second question, which is what databases, and we'll talk a little bit about connectors, which is another brilliant point about Power BI, is all the connectors are pretty much integrated. They're free and you can build custom ones. But a lot of people still using Excel. I see, SQL Server dumps into Excel and then taking multiple spreadsheets and connecting them into Power BI. I've heard some people say they didn't know that you could connect multiple sheets and a SQL Server into Power BI. And then, Greg, you live in Epic country, and some of our audience members may not know anything about Epic and its influence and penetration into the healthcare market. So let's start there. One of the big things, what is Epic, and can you why would you tie it to Power BI, and kind of start from there, Greg?
Well, that's like you said. This is when you're so close to something, it's hard to believe. Like, doesn't everyone know about Epic and what they do and who they are? No, but yeah, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's at this point getting to be almost no exaggeration to say that this town runs substantially on Epic, and it's the biggest, most muscular company that I guess a lot of people have never heard of outside of Madison. Inside of Madison, everyone's heard of Epic because they've been on a growth trajectory here for probably 15 years that has been just nothing short of phenomenal. So they are they're obviously in the healthcare space, and they're provide one of the major players. I guess Epic and Cerner are the two major players in the healthcare enterprise healthcare data space. And I'm as Charles said, I'm kind of on the ground, and I know a lot of folks that work at Epic and are using the tools and what have you. So that's just kind of by virtue of being here in Madison. And there are tons of actually little startup companies, and I'm actually I'm looking at some of that stuff myself for a niche focus that have kind of come up around the Epic niche little companies off of kind of the big Epic data system. Frank, you've got much more hands-on experience inside of.
And before we go to Frank, I want to mention, so you are in Madison, your company, Tenacious Data, you've been in accounting, but for me, I was like, man, if I have any Epic questions or how to link it to Power BI, who would I go to, right? Greg, I would go to you because you're living in Epic country, right? So this is, I just learned this, 2 weeks ago, that you were in Madison and then Epic was located there. So you're a great resource to have, and in the future, if I have any questions, I'm going to come to you. So let's jump to Frank real quick, because Frank's got kind of an international perspective, right? And on all the software and all the healthcare and in the Netherlands and how data is collected and stuff. So Frank, let's jump to you real quick.
Yeah, well, you asked about the question about BI in healthcare, and I prepared something, and you said, well, Frank, that will take 3 days to discuss that. And so I go very quickly through the sheets, but it's important because is it my screen, Charles?
Yeah,
or
it's your screen now. Yep.
Okay, now, so I go very quickly in a few minutes, and then we jump back to something that's important. I'm from a financial perspective, but it's also production. So patient data is production. Dus we will hit all the databases there are. First, a financial perspective of healthcare. The hospital needs a permission from the government in Holland. They do permission to take care of people and to treat people, and you can put your invoices to the insurance company, and all the patients have insurances in Holland, so your revenue is mostly totally from the insurance companies. The other important player in finance and then the hospital is an accommodation, so you have to pay for it, and that is mostly a loan from banks. So there are a few big stakeholders: insurance companies, banks, and patients. That's are a few stakeholders, and of course the government. You have to put yearly an annual report for accountability. Okay, now this is just making sense from, but Frank, that you say that, but let's see it in a P&L statement. Greg is also a CPA, so this will speak to him. There's a balance sheet, revenue from the 380 million. There is 350 million from the insurance companies, and you see also a loan here. From the 300 million, you're financed 100 million from the banks. So that are big players, stakeholders to give information. Okay, the other people, that's just other perspective, is the management perspective of BI. And everybody knows the planning and control cycles. And just to make sense, in Europe we got a framework to define some stakeholders, and that is very convenient to also determine your information needs. So you got here your policy and budget cycles. You start with a mission, a vision. That's a multi-annual, and then you go to a framework letter, a plan, activities, etc. But also production, also formation, also accommodation, and all this stuff you want some information about. Not only the direction and the boards, because the boards of directions have to make accountability to the stakeholders, but also internally. So you can put on the balance scorecard on it to make it excuse my English, to make it more measurable. You can define key critical performance indicators, and then you can measure them, and there comes BI in play. And that's not only for the financial side, but it's also for the customers and also for the employees, because the employees are also big stakeholders. You can see here you have 350 million on revenue, but you also got 170 million on expenses of your employees. So you want to measure employees, you want to measure your customers, and you want to measure your financial results and your operations. So that's BI in play. Okay, now this is a sheet for planning contract. Then we make it a little bit simpler, because we thought that we had employees. There's a system. That's what Charles was speaking about. You got a system for your payrolling and your human resources. You got a system for your production. That is what Greg has told about as Epic. All your patient data. You got your bookkeeping, and you got some other databases. But all these databases you want to connect. And in BI land, you can do that by a data model, Power BI, or you can build an enterprise data warehouse. Some hospitals already got an enterprise data warehouse. Some are switching, like we. So we made a data model, and now we are discussing: do we want a new enterprise data warehouse, and which kind? That's I don't come to discuss here, but that's just vision. And then then we come in the nasty details, and that is
Yes.
I hope you can see it a little bit. This is the diagram of architecture of Power BI in a hospital. So, okay, we don't have if you don't have an enterprise data warehouse, you can still make a model, like correct are saying, to connect the important pieces of information together to get your information on the levels of direction, level of management, and direction of financials, and even of team leaders or unit in the hospital. So that's all. That's what you are seeing here. This is the real real playing field of the data. To discuss it a little bit, and then we can go all the way. Here is I call it electronic patient dossier. It's it's your production. It is it can be Epic, it can be other tooling, but Epic is a great player in this area. But there are still other companies. What we do, we have here the others. We have here a system for the organization. Which departments you got, which budget holders you got. We have a system for our paying for employees to pay them. We have got a system. It's an ERP system for not only bookkeeping but also for our inventory and stuff. And that's called the Dynamics Navision, also from Microsoft. And here we show that we all connected that to a model. A server, and on the server we have the gateway, and the gateway is connected with the Power BI services. Yeah, we can discuss all kinds of things, Charles. So what you want, but this is 2 days in 3 minutes. So yeah. So, what's your approach?
Frank, yeah, as always, wonderful graphics, wonderfully laid out. You know, when I look at all these graphics, these are super complex systems, and I just want to know how your brain works to organize and put it into something that people can understand, right? It's amazing the work that you do. So I just want to caveat, so we're going to have some members in our audience that are going to work with 1 or 2 databases and maybe Excel spreadsheets, and you can see there's Excel in here. And that's one of the beauties of Power BI is it can connect. They've built connectors to almost every database and every system. And if you need to, you can add them on the fly, add more. You know, they're adding connectors all the time. Or you can go real simply and just do 1 or 2 Excel sheets into Power BI, right? So some people don't realize that you can go down to just 1 or 2 connections, or as in what you're showing here, you've got 4 or 5. Also, my comment, can you go back one? There's ERP. You had kind of the different departments in ERP. Another slide. Yeah, this is an interesting one because, and I'm assuming here, I'm not too familiar with Epic, but you said that manages kind of the Epic or the patient information, and potentially, so that would be organization, maybe other, but there are other, you know, hospitals that use maybe a different system for HRM and payroll, a different. Oh, Epic might be the production system, right? And then bookkeeping, you know, are there other databases you've seen that hospitals are using? Is there a standard in the hospital world, or?
Well, there's not a standard. There are on each front, on each part. So on the HRM payroll, there are a few leaders and followers, and also on the production, we got three real competitors, and you got a lot of little players. But Epic Hix is one in Holland. Epic is one in Holland. Also the bookkeeping, you got a few we got AVAS, you got Navision, we got Exact, and that's all depending on each other. And so it's not one common model for every hospital.
Gotcha.
It is the information is the same. So if you have a good bookkeeping, you can do the same trick again. So you have your transactions, you have your general ledger, and that doesn't matter which kind of database you got. It's the same information. The table looks a little bit different, but it's on the same tables. And what you do in Power BI, you combine the tables again. So and Navision is a free. You said there are connectors. We started with connectors, and then we got a little bit professional. And so we made to the organization database, to the payroll database, to the booking database. We made ODBC connections.
Yep.
So that there are servers, and we make connections with the Power BI. And then we got also really fancy, and we decided that we copy this one. We had one for exception and one for production. So we we made it a real production stream, and also with the test and exception. And that's also important in healthcare, and that's one thing we didn't mention is that you have good protection because of the highly patient data and personal data. You have to protect it, and you see it here, we don't allow external logins in the Power BI service. And that's something we are discussing now also. We have connections with the organization database with Active Directory of Azure, and you can make very good role how to say it in English? Role security, low-level security permissions, and but that's very important.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a good point. So with Active Directory integrated with role level security options, so you can say certain people have access to certain pieces of data. With the Microsoft, just they're great at security, and you have the trust that they know what they're doing about, with terms of information security. I've had discussions before with, well, this is a Microsoft product, so there's a level of trust in there that they know how to protect the information. So that's a good point.
You have to. Microsoft have a standard AVG GPL, or the standard licenses, and that's also discussable because we have other parties. For the BI is very interesting. We have patient data. Maybe can 1 minute. Patient data, we send it. We don't keep it on the premise. We send it also to external parties. They make forecasters for us, and also are determining cost prices for products, and we get back again. So we are used to send out the data, make it secure, make it, and that are some trusted parties, and then that's where the BI is in play, because external parties can then also add some benchmark data, so you get extra information back, and that you will bring into your BI, your management information system. So you enrich the data.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, so you can tap external people too to enrich the data. No, good points. And yeah, with Power BI and with other tables, I've seen this too, where you can tag it with all kinds of external databases and bring in external tagging. So this is great stuff. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and we want to bring Greg back into the discussion here. And because Greg, what's fascinating about Greg is, and what's fascinating about Power BI is, I tell people, and they're like, Power who? Power what? That's really a Microsoft product, right? You get those kinds of comments. Greg, you've been doing this for years. You know some of the original players. And so one of the questions is, this is, people are like, oh, I'm not an early adopter. I don't trust this. This is too new. This isn't new. It's been part of Excel for a long, long time. So Greg, and we'll go to Frank too, and how long you've been in this. But Greg, you have some stories, I think, of how long, where this all started, and your experience with Power Pivot, which I think is the product that was inside of Excel, right?
Oh, geez. Oh, my goodness. Yes, Charles, that's such a great question. I feel like so incredibly fortunate that really Microsoft has taken this whole BI story and made it kind of massive and a juggernaut. For those of us who were sort of turn the clocks back a decade ago, and we're not technologists, we're financial people, we're analyst type people, and we're toying around with this this thing, this add-in inside of Excel, and turn the clocks 10 years ahead, and I can't even believe I'm looking at Frank's diagram of all these. Like, that is just like, how did we get here? So yeah, I think that whole idea that was always super, what Microsoft in my mind has always done well is personal productivity tools. And particularly now with Satya Nadella, new CEO, this idea that of data culture, that really that you can empower everyone in the organization to do more with data. That's Microsoft's slogan, but I actually think it really resonates with me. That you don't have to be a $400 an hour business intelligence consultant to really go in and make a difference with these tools. So kind of getting back to your question, the whole Power Pivot story was something here in Madison. Leonard Murphy and I started a user group, and we had called Modern Excel. And it was, for us, we had thought, kind of there was enough there to, really build a community and user group around just, for Excel geeks that, wanted to do more. And then, that it has kind of come to this massive thing that it is now has been, really just an amazing thing to watch. But, from my humble, and I still honestly don't consider myself a technologist, but it's just that the tools are becoming so powerful. And the Power BI story, I was telling Charles earlier that for those of us in Excel world, we saw Excel vanquish so many tools in kind of its 20-year reign that we maybe at first glance thought this Power BI desktop, like, we had mixed emotions whether it was even going to work. Like, it's just going to be another thing that dies, and we're all going to just go back to Excel. But at this stage, I think for even us Excel diehards, that it's time to get completely on the Power BI wagon.
Yeah, no, I think I'm right with you, because I've been in VBA, I've been inside Excel with all the functions, VLOOKUPs, and Matt Ellington said it, I watched his video, and he's like, you remember the old days when each column you had to do a VLOOKUP for each kind of column, bringing it into your flat file? And he's like, now you drag and drop that line from your lookup table with your key to your data table, and boom, everything, all the columns in your lookup table are now tied one line, and it's all automated. And then you start playing with the reports, and everything's just updated, right? Instead of having all those columns with VLOOKUPs in every single cell, it was mind blowing when I watched Matt Ellington do that. I was like, each cell has its own equation in Excel. You have a single line that just ties the keys together and draws all the information into your data table. That was just, when I saw that, I was like, that's incredible. And that's why I'm jumping to Power BI, because the lookup table, the star schema, how the data flows now is just amazing. So Frank, kind of, your journey, what were you using before? When did you get introduced to Power BI, and were you into Power Pivot and Excel before, or what?
Well, at I first made something in MS SQL, because Power Pivot was for the version 2010, and we got 2003 at the company, still in 2009 or something. So it wasn't I will play with it, but it wasn't in production. So we did it in MS SQL, and then you have your left outer joint and your right outer joint, and it doesn't work. And if you look up, you have to every month you did the same job. And then we go to a real data warehouse and real stuff, and we did a whole project. And I get played with ClickView, and I got a site from Microsoft, and then I got Cognos, and a few years later, and we needed a tool, and it was last year, and I was looking and searching, and we have a vision, and so I come across Power BI, and I thought, hey, this I know, this Power Pivot.
It's Power Pivot.
This is great. This is and then I was exploring with it. I get together with an old colleague of me. He's working as a BI consultant, and with us two of us, we went to the hospital and we did it. And the rest is now a history for the last year.
Oh, interesting. So Frank, we'll bring you back because your experience with ClickView, with Cognos, with everything, you've tried a bunch of different alternatives too. So and in my last show, I brought some people that had tried Tableau and did some comparisons. So I need to bring you back.
Also business objects, and what I also have some because of I try all the futures of Power BI and all the things I touch. I want it all. So I also have already got some issues with Power BI, but the issues for the other tooling are bigger. So so the business objects, and then you go to the crystal reports are old, but I think Power BI is the first tool. I think, okay, I can accept and I can around the problem, but it's all in one hand, and that's great.
Wow. So we need you to help with one of those your nice fancy charts with ClickView, Cognos, business objects, and everything, and do a comparison. So we're gonna bring you back. So I'm going to jump to another topic, and if anybody has in the audience, and I posted this on LinkedIn too, if you have questions for our guests, so we're approaching the 40-minute mark, and we'll probably have 20 minutes left, and I'd love to, if anybody's out there watching, I see 5 on LinkedIn. If you have questions, post them, or let us know where you're from, because we've had audience from overseas. We have members here from Michigan, Wisconsin, and the Netherlands, which is very cool. The one of the things I wrote down here, I think, it was either Greg or Frank you mentioned, is the speed. And I think I talked about it before too. So before, I remember being in the business world and going to the IT department. I was like, I need this report. And they're like, give us 2 weeks, right? And then it comes to 2 weeks, and they're like, you have a couple fixes. It's like another 2 weeks before you get something so you're 3 weeks, 4 weeks out before you get something. And then I remember the times when, I'm pasting together, stacking charts in Excel, or I'm trying to unpivot and I'm cutting and pasting, doing transpositions, and I'm trying to unpivot stuff in Excel, and it would take me hours to stack all this data. So there was time to build reports and bring in new data. And then, so there was always a lag, right? There was time, there's cost, there's money, and then what I found with Power BI is projects before that would have, you had to get into the IT queue and it would take 4 weeks to get that back. I can do now in like hours, right? In a day. It's so fast. And then the refresh, once you set up auto refresh, you kind of forget about it until you get that error message that somebody added a column and there's an error in your data table, right? And you're like, I got to go fix that now. But every morning you could set it up for like midnight and all the data comes in and refreshes and you don't have to do anything, right? So I think one of the critical differences that I've experienced is the speed at how fast I can generate reports, how fast I can connect to new sources, how fast I can refresh data and get updated insights to the world. So maybe both of you can comment on that, but I think that's a game changer. It was for me because I spent so much wasted time before,
So I mean, that's actually, I think, the killer piece of, kind of why we're all sitting here talking today. So I guess in terms of the, foresightedness of, some of these, people that created this technology, when it was in its infancy, the stuff we're dealing with, this was called Project Gemini. And the Gemini, as an idea, was the coming together of the two worlds, which was the business and the IT. Like, it's been almost like this age-old, this kind of like, oh, it's all like all that stuff you're talking about, Charles. And like, oh, this little change and it's going to be a year, and put it in the queue, and the business hates IT. And like, that's actually, if you would believe it, but if they, all those years ago when they thought about this thing, that's actually, you're talking about speed now, but that's what, that the three of us are sitting here talking about it. Hey, hat tip to, the founders and the folks that gave us this, incredibly tooling. I've already, I've never worked at that level of, my brain doesn't work at that level of creativity and ability to, change whole industries like that. But I will say, that I recognized, kind of what was going on here, and then, kind of be able to connect and put it to use. That's, I sometimes do bemoan the fact, and I've done this on Twitter and LinkedIn. Gosh, I wish it would have been, an analyst starting out my career with this tool set. Like, come on, man, could you just like I'm, 23 and I got all this tooling. You just drop it and like, here's your tooling. Go analyze. And like, for those of us, that's the part where you're just like kind of a pig in slop, right? Just get the data and the tools, and you're just like the speed that you're talking about, and you're, there's a real, dopamine rush that goes along with, getting great, analysis and making a difference. So, in some sense, for the business folks, we, I suspect we're impact junkies, and, not, so you have different personas that are attracted to this technology. And, for me, that's the nail on the head, Charles. Speed.
Yeah, no, you're right. Just the speed to the insight, to the solution to the problem. I don't, as a business strategist, I don't want to wait, as a project manager, you were looking for decisions instantaneously. And to be told that you have to wait a week in queue because something else was in priority, you're like, no, this is thousands of dollars. I need the decision now. Yeah. And that for me was, once I got the power of Power BI and I could get insights, I drag that column in, I write that measure, and boom, there was the answer. You're like, I just solved this problem, and I just save the company $20, $30, $40, $50,000. The impact is so huge. And I think, Greg, you're right. It's speed, and we're impact junkies. We love to make an impact. And I think it's a human thing too, is like, we want to make an impact, but we don't want to wait for it. We want it now. We want to make a difference in the world. And that's what Power BI has given, to me too. So yeah, Frank, your thoughts on,
I because we already got a wish, we got already some model in our head, and we know the data. We are above the data. Craig is also CPA, so he thinks in processes and in bindings. I think for us it's a wish come true, but for some people you have to also have the patience. That's the period I'm now in. It's my child, and I want to give it to BI services, but it's not so quick as I want it to be. But you have to do it because 10 people can do a lot more than one very quickly, and we got a waiting list with all kind of demands because everybody wants stuff. So I think Craig said, I wanted to be now this and this. I think you are right, but also you got the baggage and the combination to make it look simple and make it fast. And I think a lot of business analysts are just saying, well, what is he talking about? How do you know all the relationships and what he want to see on what the user want to see? And that's what correct? And that's what we have to bring over to the people now, the young people. I'm not so old, but But you see that the data-driven people that are now coming for school are very quick with also with new tools. And we have to give them the experience we got in the modeling and the thinking.
Mm. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. I can do stuff now in Power BI and Power Query so fast, but when I talk to my clients, sometimes I'll show them the relationship view and this beautiful star schema. I was like, wow, look at this thing, and I look over and they're like, it's just a bunch of tables, right? And to me, it's beautiful because I see in my head the relationships and stuff. But and then there's a shortage too. The other thing you talk about is there's a shortage of people now that can take the business questions and then build the star schema in a form that where you can answer the questions quickly, right? So I see a lot of broken data models and data models that multi relationships and just not built to utilize Power BI right. So there's this training, there's a shortage now, and I've heard of some bigger companies that have Power BI departments and they're just overloaded, right? Because there's so many requests going to them that they can't, so they need to grow. But then where do you find the people with DAX, with M, with data modeling, star schema type of experience? So I feel like there's a shortage there, and maybe that's, Frank, what you're talking about is we gotta build that infrastructure and those people that can help with the data modeling, right? So
yeah. So I do have a comment. So I was at a conference in Seattle, and I was sitting next to Bill Jelen, Mr. Excel, and he said there's actually two Excel users in the world. There's the Excel users that know VLOOKUP and the ones that don't. And so, he had this very simple dichotomy to, and if anyone would know, it would be Bill, right? So I suspect in 2020, that group of people that 20 years ago that knew VLOOKUP, that's your new crowd of star schema folks.
Yeah.
So everyone that could do VLOOKUPs in Excel, there was still a contingent that didn't want to get their hands dirty with VLOOKUP, right? And it turns out maybe they'll never have to now. But it's star schema is, you're going to get that probably that same persona that wanted to get in and roll their sleeves up enough with VLOOKUP to get in there and do some in all these departments that are going to need to do a little bit of dimensional modeling. I also on Bill Jelen, he said, I feel like I could, like, this is back, he said, I feel like I could go to almost just, you could drop me like Batman in any office complex in the country and I could immediately be useful. So he just knew that, you just drop Bill anywhere and like he'd roam around for a little bit and he'd go around to a desk. Oh, I see you working in Excel. Did you know you could? So, just the, kind of commenting on, the whatever, 100 million Excel users, but how ubiquitous, these tools are.
Right. So Frank, any thoughts on that? And what skills do you look for when you potentially look for a Power BI developer? We talk a little bit about star schema, calculate, the filter functions. Those are type of things I look for, but.
Well, I think in the new data people are they know SQL, they know their data connections, the extracts and translate and load work. But I'm looking for the people that can make the transaction in their head from the end user to that data model.
No, good point.
And the discussion about is that the data analyst, how do we call that? But that's the true purpose of Power BI is you get information, and so you have to have a good sense of, can I get the question right, and can I translate that back to the data model or to whatever? But just people that listen to other people, huh?
There's a lot of listening going on because, you got to take the question from the business user and translate it into the data model and then build up the DAX in between to bridge their visual to that data model. So that's a fascinating thought and I've found that too, is there's also a dichotomy too. There's the people that can build a data model And then there's the people with enough experience to look at the visuals and the insights and say, and have enough context to translate it into a solution that's potentially money saving or improves efficiency and stuff. So I find there's almost a translation piece too. You can build the most beautiful data model, but unless there's somebody there to convert it into action, into something that somebody can do to provide that savings, that you'll have a gap still. And there's some people with enough experience that can provide. And that's what's fascinating is, Power BI, Microsoft was brilliant in that they gave it to the business analysts, the people that understood the processes and the business and had to make those decisions to drive the action. And they gave a tool that was easy enough to learn so that that person that had the context to do the translation could now also do the technical side. So there wasn't this IT and business separation. They merged the two into one tool, which is just brilliant, I think, to give that insight to that person, the person with the context. So no, great lead into that discussion and conclusion. Wow, powerful stuff. So we're approaching 50 minutes. I'm not sure if, so do you guys have any, so let's do, so one more question. So I just want to ask you, Greg, so you come more from the oil and insurance, right? Where you were saying?
Yes, those are industries. Yep.
So the
I've worked in a lot of industries. I've done a lot of consulting with various, consulting outfits here just in my hometowns. I've been sort of doing a lot of consulting work in a 20-mile radius of my house. So
yeah,
I need to broaden. So, but working with various consulting firms, accounting firms. So I've worked for the University of Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, and I've worked with some retailers here in town. But mostly, I've been kind of location consulting. So
yeah,
probably need to get on a plane here at some point.
Gotcha. Now, what are some trends you're seeing in your market? So with the health, the insurance, the retail, has oil, because of the oil prices, has that dropped off, or are you seeing any upticks or downticks in the niches that you play in?
So that was getting to be a while ago. I've stayed in touch. In fact, I'm in Madison. We were doing, I was in the oil business in Chicago.
Yeah.
And my former boss here moved like a block away from me in Madison. He took a job with the University of Wisconsin. But I would say it's just such a, we live in, I don't need to tell anyone, we live in very crazy times. So yes, to be an oil trader now and to be leveraging data, which is kind of where I got bit by the data bug that we were, oil trading and keeping track of billions of dollars worth of crude oil. And back then, and maybe it's changed, but basically we had, big oil company with unlimited deep pockets. And we had SAP and, for the enterprise, but essentially everything was export to Excel.
Yeah.
You ran the whole business. Just, hit export. And then, and so I was keeping track of billions of dollars worth of, crude oil and pipelines in Excel. And so you didn't need anyone to tell you the power of Excel, right? And, I suspect a big chunk of the world still, runs like that. So, but, in terms of, that we live in crazy times, I mean, don't get me started, Charles.
Yeah. No, it's true. It is crazy times. I think you bring up a very important point. A lot of people, and I hear people, oh, we already have SAP. We already have, do you want to look at Power BI? We already have SAP. We already have Epic. We already have Salesforce.
Yeah.
But then you start asking the questions, and
at the brass tacks level, you're going to end up in like when you're actually at the level of people doing work and doing the job, you're at this sort of super brass tacks level. So, the executive on the golf course says, we already have Cognos, we already have SAP BPC, we already have Hyperion, and then you go talk to the folks doing the work, right?
Yep, and they found the export to Excel button. So many have, and so many, when they talk to me about Power BI consulting, it's Excel, CSV. They dumped it out of their databases because they're like, we can't use that thing because the user interface, et cetera. So that's a great point, Greg. So Frank, any comments from you in terms of industry upticks? And then
I think
go ahead.
to bring it to the healthcare, what Greg is saying is true. There's a lot of export and a lot of knowledge inside of people's heads that don't reach other people. And I think Power BI make it possible that we can combine data, and then in the hospital you can also say, okay, it's like a production. It's like logistics. How do we manage our patients? And then I go from the patients that we send a bill, and you see what kind of time it took from coming in the hospital to going out the hospital, which kind of activities there were at site, and which kinds of activity other hospital can do. That's some benchmark add on. Then you have multiple information to analyze and explain and make also the process better. I think not only Power BI will bring fast speed in current data, but also what Greg is saying, it's also possible to bring in other sites from other sectors, and then look at, okay, I look with that glass to the healthcare. What did I see?
Interesting. So you're bringing in trends from other databases that you may have not thought about impacting you. This one's an obvious one, but grains and stuff and growth, and then you tap into some weather or predictive analysis, and you bring in weather and data, and you do that analysis. But you start seeing, once you see how Power BI works and how you can connect data together, you ask more questions. I guess the ceiling is raised in terms of connections you can make and the expansion of that database. Is that kind of the thought, Frank?
Yeah, that's the future. So now we are still do it for our own, for your own hospital, and you have external parties for that kind of analysis, and you want to bring that all together. And that's not one specific application or one specific. That's just overseeing the process.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's true. Good discussions, everybody. So we're approaching the hour mark, so I'm going to end it here. But you guys, thank you for coming on the show. And I'm just going to end with one last question before we go. So we're going to have some audience members today that are interested in healthcare industry, interested in Power BI, potentially maybe kind of like us, maybe impact junkies, want to make a difference. Maybe some words of advice for them in the future. How should they get started? Do you have a piece of advice for them? What should they start now? Is it too late? And how should they get started? Greg, we'll start with you, and then Frank.
So we live in almost the golden age of just this plethora, almost like free available information to learn almost anything. And so, data and analytics seems like that's something that almost in any occupation, if you've got some skills there that it's going to serve you well in really any domain. So again, I think we all came together with via Avi Singh, and he's got learn Power BI. And there's folks like there's Avi, and there's folks like Avi out there that can skill you up if you're interested in kind of going down a path that the three of us are on, which is kind of that deeper cut. But it does seem like Frank mentioned this whole idea of mashing up data sources and putting things together and analyzing, and it does seem like that's going to be a 21st century skill that almost kind of think they're going to graduate college kids with that stuff. They're not going to let them out the door without having some. So I would say by all means that kind of what stage of your career you should kind of going down. We've picked Power BI as one way to do this. There's obviously lots of ways you can kind of go down that, but it's a great time to be an analyst is my thought.
Yeah, and I think from you, Greg, you're I think been in the longest, 10, 15 years. You saw it develop. And I think before this show, you told me you're seeing the tipping point, right, recently. So that's the insight I wanted to convey to our audience is what you've seen since you've seen this whole thing. You're like, we're finally at the tipping point where this thing is starting to take off, right? So
yeah, no doubt. So we thought, for those of us who thought that, the power pivot thing was going to be a tipping point, you're going to have 100 million power pivot users. And that didn't quite materialize. It turned into this, Power BI thing. And again, I was almost a late arriver to Power BI. Like, you guys are all going to come back to Excel and join us in Power Pivot. But, but it does feel like we've gone way past the point of no return. Power BI is really going to be a neat place to, as Microsoft continues to improve it, and that it's going to be reward you well for the investments in time, attention, energy, and learning that you make.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. Thank you, Greg. So Frank, question for you, for the newbie, for the person who's interested in healthcare or Power BI or any other business intelligence tools. What tips do you have for them going forward?
Start very, very small. Just do is your own health or your own housekeeping Excel in a desktop version. So you can see the working of the tool. You can see the how it works. Not only as a tool, but also the star schemas, the presentation layers, and the relationships. And if you do that, then you are ready to do it big. Then the rows don't matter. The how many databases you are connecting doesn't matter. And I think what Greg was saying, this is a good time to be young now and to become a data analyst. He's all right. We are not yet so far that we have the artificial intelligence, or we have the things that I was talking about are also a little bit buggy, because then there is an update, or then there is always something with the current databases, what you are telling. So I think in the future it will become much smoother and bigger and more data, more combinations. So I think if you go now in Power BI, you are ready for the future.
Oh, no, that's a good point. It's and I've heard this from other people. That's a great point. I think there's a couple things I got out of that is, start simple. That's with Power BI, you can be agile. You can just take one table, a few columns, work on that, and then add the other ones later. So that was a huge lesson learned for me. Power BI is kind of a gateway to other systems. So I know a lot of people now are mentioning that, they want to get into AI, but Power BI was such a, with implicit measures, then you go into explicit, then you DAX, then you calculate and learn variables. And it's just a nice bridge into Python or any other, wherever you want to go with data. So to me, it's a great starting point, a great ramp up into all these, so many other things. And Greg, to your point, schools are starting to teach it. Schools are starting to, look at Power BI as the tool to launch students into the future. So, as this grows, this Power BI is going to be the launching point. So great points. Thank you, guys. So hang on, I'm going to end the broadcast, and then we'll rejoin, and just in a separate dashboard real quick. And so I just want to thank you guys, and we'll tune in next week, because we have, I just want to mention next week we have some people from the automotive industry that are looking at warranty data for dealerships and kind of acting as a middleman and collecting data and kind of doing warranty analysis. And it's kind of along the lines of speed. They're collecting the data much faster than any of the OEMs could do it individually, or any dealerships. And they're aggregating this data and really seeing the overall market trends at a very, very high level, right? So it's not just one silo, one dealership, one OEM. It's a massive effort. It's going to be an interesting one next week. So tune in next week. And guys, hang on for a second. We'll chat. Right? Bye, everyone.